Hi, welcome to On the Block. I'm Ed Wilkinson, and I'm here in beautiful Bensonhurst again at St. Athanasius Parish, and we're here with the Pope of Bensonhurst, Monsignor David Cassato. They love that title.
Ed, who told you I was the Pope?
Everybody in the neighborhood.
I love it. I love it.
Listen, I want to talk with about a very significant date in American history, but also a very significant date for you. 9/11, 2001. Where were you at the time America was under attack?
It's a very long story that day. I'll never forget getting up that morning, and 9/11 that morning was beautiful. Yeah. I said Mass, and I had an appointment with Bishop Daly at that time. And I kind of knew what it was all about. I got the call the day before from Monsignor Maresca, and he said, the bishop wants to see you. So I knew it was about some sort of transfer. And not that I was very happy about that morning. And I remember sitting in the rectory, going down North 8th Street all the way to the river, and all of a sudden seeing the World Trade Center on fire. And I then proceeded again to the bishop's office. The bishop, of course, transferred me, much against my better judgment, and probably truly was the right reasons. And I got transferred that day. And as soon as I left his office, after a lot of kicking and screaming, he said to me, go do your job with the police. And a cop took me across the Brooklyn Bridge. We stopped at the 8-4 precinct right at the base of the Brooklyn Bridge, and we went in there. Nobody knew what was really happening, and I drove over the Brooklyn Bridge with the cops and spent the whole day walking around Ground Zero, walking around St. James Church, trying to do what you could do, and you really didn't know what was happening. It was a very disastrous day. Yeah. One part of the day was very interesting. At one part of the day, I was at the police academy up on 19th Street and 2nd or 3rd Avenue, and Mayor Giuliani was there. And he called me into his office and he said, Monsignor, what are we going to do? I'll never forget that. And for about 2 or 3 hours, I stood with Mayor Giuliani. We went to St. Vincent's Hospital. We went through the hospital looking for what the hospital needed. We left St. Vincent's Hospital and then went to police headquarters, walked through police headquarters, and then I went down to the morgue. And it was so touching that day, because when I went to the morgue, there was Monsignor David. And Monsignor David was walking in with all the dead of the fire department. And I'll never forget John David's face. It was so drawn. I'll never forget the pain and the suffering on his face. To me, John David is one of the best. And he did a real tremendous task with 343 firefighters that passed away that day. And
you were fairly new to the police department at that time.
It was interesting. It's true. I became chaplain June 18th of 2001. And it was the quietest summer in my life. It was quiet. No cops called me. I said, they don't even know I'm a chaplain. I'm Pope of Bensonhurst. They don't know I'm chaplain. So it worked out. And then 9/11 happened, and the chaplains of the NYPD and all the other departments were out there in the street every day with all those people. I'll never forget those days. Yeah. And it's interesting because sometimes I even dream about it and the real horrific event of 9/11. Ministering to people that day and ministering to the 23 families of the police department was indeed fantastic. And I can tell you, I am in touch with those 23 families still to this very day. Yeah. And going through the funerals, going through the wakes of the ones that had wakes, doing the funeral masses was a very, very touching and powerful time in my life, touching to my priesthood. And I got to be honest with you, I think it has really affected my life more than I sometimes even realize.
Yeah. What can you say to families? I mean, you get called to a lot of tragedies. Policemen get shot, and you might get called and you go to the family. So what do you say to them?
There's not much to say. The idea is to be with, and I spend a lot of time with. Just the other day, I'm sure you saw in the papers of the police officer that died in that horrific car accident on the day of his wedding. And I went to the wake and went to the funeral, and there's not much you can say except, to be strong in faith and to stand there with them and to be present with them. And I spent a whole lot of time with those people that just recently. And the ministry of being police chaplain, which is probably one of the greatest joys in my life, is really a ministry of presence, spending time with people, going through the good and the troubles and the tragedies.
For a while that day, we had heard that the Monsignor Dalendic was missing. You know, we thought he had been killed there for a while because nobody had heard anything from him. But you saw him during the day.
Right,
there.
I saw him that day, and I'll never forget it. He went through hell.
Yeah.
I mean, he really, but he did such a wonderful job. And the fire department, the firefighters love him. They love him.
How are you able to find time to do that? Because you have a full-time job here as pastor, and you know you've got other diocesan committees that you belong to. So I mean, you don't have a lot of free time, I guess.
You don't have too much free time, but the whole point is you're trying to organize your time, and I have trouble with that sometimes. Sometimes I put too many things on the same day. I tell you, last weekend I had the biggest tragedy of my life. I had 2 weddings at the same time in 2 different churches. And
you bilocate?
Padre Pio helped me, and I tried to bilocate, but it was interesting because I had 2 weddings at the same time. So what I did was I told one come 15 minutes early, and I told the other one come 15 minutes late, and I made it a little late at the second one, but I got them both done. Maybe the second one was as happy as the first. But
now, when you were talking to Bishop Daly that day on 9/11, you weren't happy to leave Our Lady of Mount Carmel. I mean, you were a fixture there. You loved the neighborhood. But when you came here to St. Athanasius, I think you quickly acclimated yourself. Yeah, this is a great parish.
It's amazing. In my priesthood, in 46 years, I've only been in 3 parishes. I was in St. Rita, Long Island City, 13 years, Mount Carmel, 17 years, and now here, 17 years. I believe in the gift of stability. I believe in the gift of stability. You talk to the bishop a little, you say, Bishop, do the right thing and keep me in the place. And I really think it's the idea is to be in a parish for a while. When you're in a parish a while, you learn an awful lot. When I was at Mount Carmel, I knew the names of even the cats and the dogs. And here, you know, this is a very large parish. I mean, we have almost 3,000 people on Sunday, and it's much more challenging. But, you know, you get in, you acclimate, and you get used to all the new things. And the first 6-8 months are tough, but after you get through that, it's great.
Yeah. Your first parish was St. Rita's in Long Island City, right?
I had Monsignor Joseph DeMarco was my first pastor. He was an Italian immigrant. And, you know, you talk about immigrants today. He was an Italian immigrant. He came here and made it. He built a church in Long Island City. He built a school, all those things that he did over there. And he was a real caring and a real committed to the people pastor.
They say that a newly ordained priest never forgets his first pastor. So what did he leave with you that you see yourself emulating today?
The sense of service to people. I remember going into his office once and saying to him, Monsignor, I got a friend of mine needs a job. He went through a card catalog at that time. You know, no phones, no iPhones, whatever. He went through a card catalog and he said, call up this guy, Mr. Reed. And he said, tell him Monsignor, you know, DeMarco said to call. That man gave my friend a job. He worked in the bank with Mr. Reed for 20 years, retired from the bank. That's the kind of man he was. He would try to help everyone. He would, and I try my best to follow that sense of service. Service to God's people, service to the people in your parish.
Yeah. How has priesthood changed since then, though? I mean, the parish life is a little bit different than it was back then.
Well, the first thing that it changed is when I was in Long Island City, we were 5 priests and a deacon. And you know, we would be together every day at the table for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we had a house where we lived together and shared together. Now with the reduction in clergy and the less clergy, it's really a challenge, you know, to first of all serve the parish, and that's a big issue. And then the sense of the priesthood is much more demanding because there's so few priests.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're coming back. We're talking with Monsignor Cassato. We're here in Bensonhurst today. Stay with us. Hey, welcome back to On the Block. I'm Ed Wilkinson, talking today with Monsignor Cassato. Monsignor, we were talking a little bit about your priesthood and being a police chaplain, but I'm wondering, when did you first think about becoming a priest? Because you didn't go to the prep seminary.
No, I avoided that as much as I could. It all started, I can tell you this, I was in public elementary school, PS 232, something like that, in Canarsie, on East 95th Street, right down the block from my house. And I went to kindergarten in public school, and I had Miss Abramowitz and Miss Kaplan. At Christmas time, I came home with a menorah, and I said to my father, "Why aren't we Jewish?" The next day, I was in the Catholic school. I'll never forget that. The next day, I was in the Catholic school. And I went to Holy Family. They just opened the school. I went in the January class, and I walked into what were nuns. And they were the most fantastic women in my life. They taught me, they inspired me, and I would say since the second or third grade, I got this call. I'll never forget, in the second grade, we had those penmanship books, the old penmanship books, and you had to write in there, you know, like, when I grow up. So I went, when I grow up, second grade, I want to be a priest to help people make their first communion. I was making my first communion then. So I had this whole thing, and there was Monsignor, he's deceased, Monsignor Ralph Florido. He was the hero. He would get up and preach to kids. He told a homily about the weeds growing up, the weeds growing in the garden, and you got to pull them, but if you don't get them by the roots, they still grow. The point was sin. If you don't get the roots out, you know, I'll never forget that. That's got to be about 20 years ago. It's got to be 65 years ago. I remember his homilies when I was a kid. He was the best. He was the best. And he was friends with my mother and father. So between Father Florido and between the sisters, the Franciscan sisters of Ringwood, New Jersey, that gave me my feel or my call, and it grew and grew and grew. In the 8th grade, I said to Sister Gemma, my 8th grade teacher, "Sister, I think I want to be a priest." Wow. She had me lined up to go into the Capuchins. My marks went from 82 to 92. I always say I should have told her in the first grade. I should have told her in the first grade I wanted to be a priest. And they went from 82 to 92, and she wanted me to go to the Capuchin seminary. And my father went up, and he said, "No, he's only 13 years old. He can't go away." And I stayed home, and I went to St. John's Prep on Lewis and Willoughby, had the Vincentian Fathers, and after the 4 years of high school, I applied to Cathedral College on Atlantic and Washington, 555 Washington Avenue, where we met, where we met, and those days, and from there it's history.
Well, how'd you get away from the Vincentians? Why didn't they grab you?
They tried. They tried. As a matter of fact, in high school, I had Father Mike Thornton. Father Mike Thornton then later taught in the seminary I went to, and I won the essay contest. You know, like another thing, I don't remember what it was about. I won the essay contest. You know what the trip was? Go to Princeton to their minor seminary for a day and experience what it was to go to the seminary for a day. Well, the Vincentians were a little too strict for me.
So you decided to go to Cathedral. Were your parents supportive of the
idea?
idea?
Well, I will tell you, Walter Mitchell, Father Walter Mitchell, I went to him when I needed a letter of recommendation. And he's the one basically talked me out of going to the Franciscans, or the Capuchins, and going to the diocese. Walter Mitchell was the one. And my father wasn't extremely keen about me being a priest. So diocesan priesthood was much better than saying you're going to go to a religious order, go away, go to different countries. So my father took it a lot better when I said I was going to Cathedral College.
How about your mother? Was she?
My mother was always pretty supportive of the whole situation. It's amazing because my mother lived her last 2 years with me here in the rectory when she was sick and near death. And she said it the day before she died. She said, "The best 2 years of my life have been living in the rectory with you."
Isn't that nice? Now, when you were at the college and then you went away to seminary, but you didn't go to the diocesan seminary here. You went away, right? Up to
you know why?
Why? I want to know why.
There was no room. There was no room in Huntington. There was 60 seminarians going to the major seminary that year, which was like 1966. There were 60 seminarians. 30 went to Huntington, 15 went to Our Lady of Angels in Albany, and 15 went to St. Bonaventure's in Olean. It was 60 at that time for that one class.
Yeah. Well, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, but I want to talk about what happened because, I mean, things are certainly different these days, you know. So we're going to take a quick break. We're coming right back talking today with Monsignor Cassato. Stay with us. Welcome back to On the Block. We're here in Bensonhurst today, and we're talking with Monsignor Dave. I'm Ed. Monsignor Dave, good to see you again.
What's going on, Ed? What's going on in Bensonhurst?
So listen, we were talking about you going up to Albany. Is that a tough transition for you to make?
It was terrible.
Really?
It was terrible.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you take it away from the guys.
First of all, I wanted to go to Huntington because, it's close. First, it was close. Mm-hmm. And, I was the first in my family to go anywhere. And 3 hours, was 3 days. And the caravan of people that came up to bring me to the seminary, my mother, my father, the parish priest, my family, everybody was crying when they left me. You thought it was the end of the world. You thought I died. And, I went up to Albany, and it was a very interesting time. I was very happy. It took a while, but I was very happy there.
What did your parents say to you as they left you that day? Do you remember anybody?
The door is open, no questions asked. I swear, that was my father. Door's open, no questions asked. You want to come home? We'll come and get you. 1, 2, 3.
So you spent 4 years up there, and then you
6.
6?
The old way.
Oh, you had the
old way.
Oh,
yeah,
my God, that's right.
Yeah, I did 6 years up there.
Wow, so that's a long time.
From 1966 to 1972.
Yeah.
Albany was wonderful, but the coldest place in the world. There was always 100 inches of snow. Every year we had 100 inches of snow.
Yeah. And when you come back, you get reunited with your classmates for Ordination Day, right?
Right.
And what do you remember about Ordination Day?
Ordination Day.
How many guys, first of all?
We were 27.
Wow.
We were 27, and I remember now Bishop Catanello, of happy memory, he walked into where we were getting vested, and he says, "Dave, you're coming to St. Rita, Long Island City." I didn't know where Long Island City was. I had no clue. I thought I was going to Canarsie, and he told me that I was going to St. Rita, and of course I went to St. Rita. But that ordination day, I remember mother and father driving to St. James Cathedral and being late, getting into church late. I remember, the celebration afterwards at Holy Family in Canarsie. The priest from Albany, Father Anthony Sidoti, who was my pastoral supervisor there, came down and he preached at my first mass.
Yeah.
I remember a whole lot of stuff.
Now, only a few people. You could only invite a few people because it's a small church and it was a large class.
Maybe.
Right.
I think we only had about 4 people you could invite to the ordination.
Yeah. And that was Bishop McGavro?
Bishop McGavro.
He was fairly new bishop at the time.
Well, right? he was my heart, Sicilian. We had the same desires: good wine and good food.
How do you fit 27 guys in that sanctuary there? I mean,
we were lined up like this in rows of 5, maybe 5, 5, 5, whatever. It was like that. It was like rows after each.
Yeah. Was there a particular moment in the ceremony that stands out in your memory?
I remember being on the floor. I do remember that very clearly, and the coldness of the floor, and just lying there and having that experience inside of yourself, knowing that you're going to be a priest.
So what was your first assignment like then? You went to St. Rita's, Long Island City, like you said, it's a foreign country to you.
And it was totally different. I grew up in Canarsie. Canarsie was all private homes. Yeah. I walked into St. Rita, Long Island City, and you walk in, and there were 2 city projects. There was Ravenswood and Queensbridge, and there was about 3 blocks of private homes, factories across the street, factories around the corner. I mean, in those days, Long Island City wasn't what it was today, and it was a real factory neighborhood, and people lived and worked in the neighborhood. They would go across the street to the factory to work, and right across from the church were factories. Even when I went to Williamsburg, the experience of Williamsburg was very similar to Long Island City. There were not a density of homes, and there were a lot of factories all over Long Island City. I mean, you can still see it at Mount Carmel. I mean, right across the street there was a stamping company, and you'd hear them, banging the factory machines working all day long.
Yeah. Our Lady Mount Carmel, of course, is famous for the feast.
The feast,
right?
La Vesta.
The whole year goes around the feast there, right? What were those 10 days or so like for you? I mean,
Ed, it wasn't 10 days. When I went there, it was 20 days.
Really?
It started June 26th and ended July 16th with the feast day of Our Lady. 20 days in the street. It was one of the longest feasts. I started reducing it. It used to be, then I moved it to 18. People said, what are you doing making it shorter? 16, and finally got it down to 12.
Yeah.
That's the way it is now.
Yeah.
But it was a job. It was a job. When it was over, all you wanted to do was go to bed. It was a job.
Yeah. Now the neighborhood has changed there. Of course, it's become
Radically.
very gentrified, but still that old Italian tradition, there are enough people there to keep that alive.
They keep that feast alive, and I tell you, it's a wonderful celebration. Behind the scenes, there's a lot of headaches. You know, you're putting stands in front of people's houses. You got issues with the city, with the licensing, but it's a wonderful, wonderful feast. And to me, the best day is July 16th. When you go through the streets, I mean, the Giglio is nice, the whole lifts are wonderful, but the best day is when people come and honor Our Lady of Mount Carmel. When I was there, and I think they still do, we used to order 10,000 scapulars. And we would, at the end, we'd have to look around, get a few more scapulars. We would give out 10,000 scapulars for the devotion to Our Lady. And Bishop Damasio and I have one thing very much in common, and that's our Italian food, and, well, one thing, two things, and the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Right, because that was his assignment in Newark, right? Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So you both have a devotion to Our Lady of Mount Carmel.
Lady of Mount Carmel has done many miracles for me.
You had like a parade of bishops coming to when you were down there, right?
Sure.
The beginning, the middle, the end. There was
I don't
always
know why they don't do that anymore. You got to talk to Monsignor Jamie. I don't know. You got to get the bishops. We had cardinals. Cardinal Bevilacqua came. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And it was a joy to the neighborhood. It really was wonderful.
Now you came here to St. Athanasius, and we talked a little bit about that, that time when you were reassigned, and you've been here, what?
Almost 17 years.
17 years.
Yeah.
Was it a big change? I mean, this is a family neighborhood here.
Tremendous change. Tremendous change. When I walked into church, one mass there would be 600 people. Mount Carmel was all day 600 people. It was, it's a tremendously big parish, tremendously active parish, a tremendously wonderful parish. I mean, there's. I ask anything. Can you get this done? It gets done.
Yeah. You obviously like being a priest. You love
I
being
love
a
it.
priest,
I love
right?
it. I got to tell you, I have 46 years, no regrets. No regrets about it at all.
What gives you the greatest satisfaction?
I guess when you see somebody come back to you, and you see a kid and he says, you taught me this, or you gave me my first communion, or you did my mother and father's wedding, or whatever. When people come back and say to you, wow, you touched my life, and sometimes you don't even realize it. It makes a great amount of difference.
You're obviously a people person. You like being around people, but there's a lot of administrative work also as a pastor. How do you balance that? I mean, you do that pretty well.
You get good help. Get good help to help you. My administrative assistant here, she could run the parish. She could run the parish. And and you do, between the police and the parish and the high school, Kearney High School, and other responsibilities, it takes a lot. And you need good people with you, working with you. The rectory staff, the other priests in the parish.
Yeah, we talked so much about there were 27 people ordained the day you were. This year there's only going to be 5 ordained for our diocese. What happened in those years? What happened to the church? Why are people still being called? Are they not hearing the call? What's going on here?
I think people are still being called. I think it's a much more challenging decision. So there was a Sicilian lady that came up to me and said to me when I was going to be a priest, she said, "Mishkin," and that means poor boy. Why? Nobody loves you? Why do you want to be a priest? And I got to say, 45 years, I have no regrets. Mishkin and all, I have no regrets about the whole situation.
If a young man came to you today and said, "Hey, Monsignor, I'm thinking about becoming a priest," what advice would you give to them?
I try to encourage them because it's a tough decision to make. And as I was saying, it was cultural. When I was a kid, it was cultural. Today, to say you're going to do this, and you're not, getting compensated or whatever it is countercultural. And the church is, constantly fighting the culture. And that's probably the greatest reason, I think, that it's really just a fight. There's kids, there's tons of them yet that are called.
Right. It's a great place to end on. Monsignor, obviously a happy priest, and thanks for sharing your experiences with us.
I gladly have you here anytime.
The Pope of Bensonhurst.
That's it.
Thanks to Monsignor for being with us today. Thank you for being with us. Make sure you join us again next time.